Good afternoon, everyone. We're pleased to have you join us for this 90-minute webinar to present some highlights from our work on the BOBCAT network project, which concluded in December 2021. My name is Marty Hohenberger. I'm the Director for the Center of Economic Development and Community Resilience here at Ohio University's Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Service. Our team is eager to share with you some of our key efforts and successes from this 2-year grant funded by the U.S. Economic Development Administration and Ohio's Appalachian New Economy Partnership. I'll go over who the presenters are for today's webinar. First up will be Dr. Jason Jolly. Jason's the Associate Dean for Public Strategy and Innovation. He's also the Director for the MPA program and Professor of Rural Economic Development here at the Voinovich School and the Principal Investigator for this grant. Next will be John Hemmings. John is the Executive Director for the Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission. Evan Skirty, Principal at Skirty Consulting and one of the 2 recovery coordinators for this project focused on Adams, Lawrence, and Scioto counties. The other recovery coordinator is Jason Hammond. Jason's the principal at Hammond Consulting Group. Next will be Brent Lane. Brent's an executive in residence here at the Voinovich School. Mike McNamara has joined us. He is the Director of Economic and Community Development for Clermont County. Katie Farber, last but not least, is the Vice President with Ohio Southeast. Ohio Southeast is one of the 6 regional partners in the Jobs Ohio Network. We should have time at the end of the presentation for Q&A, and we'll also be taking questions after Jason Jolly and John Hemmings' presentation. They have a hard stop at 2, so we want to give them a chance to answer any of your questions. The audience will be muted during the webinar, but please put your questions in the Q&A and indicate which presenter it's directed to. With that, let's get started. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jolly.
All right, getting my camera on here. So we're thrilled to have everyone with us today for this webinar on the BOBCAT network. I wanted to just share some background information about the project, and then I'm going to turn over to my colleague, John Hemmings, to share a little bit of an overview, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentations about some of our key findings and some of the outcomes of the project. So the Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Service has a long history of working in the region here in Appalachian, Ohio on issues of economic and community development. We were generously funded by the U.S. Economic Development Administration for this particular project. One of the things that I'd like to share with you is a little bit of background first, so folks who may be not familiar with the project can get a little bit of an understanding of what we did and who was engaged with this particular effort. In 2017, I believe that it was, we began doing some work in the region on the closures of coal-fired power plants and looking at what are the occupational skills of people working in coal-fired power plants and how do those occupational skills transfer over to new and emerging occupations. What we found were that many of the people working in coal-fired power plants often would be able to transition to other positions, but the positions that they transfer to would be much lower paying. And this would have significant impacts on the communities where those individuals were living as a result of those lower wages. In partnership with our colleagues at OVRDC, including John Hemmings, we began to look at how we might think about transitioning the region away from some of the coal dependency, particularly as a result of some of the large coal-fired power plant closures that were occurring in Adams County. So we have great partners in Adams County, a lot of wonderful folks there working to help that community grow and look for economic opportunity, including Holly Johnson, who's their Economic Development Director. So we approached Holly and the commissioners in Adams County and asked if there was a way we might be able to put together a project and seek EDA funding to work around the closure of 2 Dayton Power and Light facilities. the Stewart station, the Stewart and the Killing plants, along with a training facility. So 3 facilities closing total, 2 of which were power plants in Adams County. We did some economic impact modeling of that, and we found 370 jobs total and about 1,100 jobs in the broader economy as a result of those closures, as well as a pretty significant loss of tax base. Some of the estimates were upwards of $8 million for Adams County and many of the other local government entities in the county, boards of Double and Disability, Senior Center, et cetera. So partnering with Adams County and with OVRDC, we began exploring a large grant called Building Opportunities Beyond Coal, Accelerating Transition, or BOBCAT. We called it the BOBCAT Network. And we began looking at how we could help Adams County and the region. We also discovered in the course of putting together the grant that there was a need in Scioto and Lawrence County for brownfields remediation and looking for economic opportunities to diversify around the closure of many of the coal supply facilities. At the end of the day, we were able to submit a $1.6 million request to the U.S. Economic Development Administration, which they generously funded, and we provided $400,000 in match support out of our Appalachian New Economy Partnership state appropriation. In total, this $2 million project brought 2 economic recovery coordinators, Evan Skirty and Jason Hamlin, who are going to speak a little bit later, to work on the region. Evan worked in Adams County directly with Holly Johnson and the economic development folks there, and Jason worked directly with the folks in Lawrence and Scioto counties. We were also able to hire 2 Voinovich School employees, one of which was placed directly in the Adams County Economic Development Office to help them with the day-to-day activities related to the grant, and one was placed in the Lawrence County Economic Development offices. So over the course of this project, which ended up getting extended and being a little over a 3-year project, we saw a great deal of transformation and challenges that changed in the region. We began the project thinking about how are we going to look for reemployment opportunities for so many of these displaced workers? How are we going to diversify around the coal economy? And not long into the project, of course, COVID happened. And we began to look at how are we going to help the community with our original scope of work, but under a different frame of COVID, which really impacted our ability to meet in person and to work directly in the community the way that we had planned. And of course, we're ending the project now in light of what many are calling the Great Resignation and the real challenge that our employers are finding, or employers are having with finding employees. So within the scope of work that we set to USEDA, we have tweaked some of the activities that we've done, and you're going to hear about some of that, including some work around attracting remote workers. So this has been an exciting project. We are certainly thankful for USEDA for their support of the project, their support of the region, and the support of these communities which need this assistance. I have always said to folks, if you're thinking about looking at EDA funding, you instead need to look at EDA as a partner. And EDA has been a great partner, not just to Ohio University and not just to OVRDC, but to the Appalachian Ohio region. And so seeing EDA as a partner has been key to the successful delivery of this project, along with many others that we're working on in the region. So as Marty alluded to, John Hemmings and I do have a 2 o'clock hard stop. So I'm going to turn it over to John, and then he and I will be happy to take any questions that come in through the chat or communication to our moderator, which she'll share with us. There is a large economic development announcement being made today by Governor DeWine at 2:30, and John and I need to leave at 2 to get over to the location for the watch party for the announcement in our region. So that's why we have the hard stop at 1 for John and myself. So John, I'll let you go, and then we'll see what questions folks have for us, and then we'll move forward with the real meat of the presentation and hear about some of the key outcomes and findings of our project.
Thanks, Jason. I'm John Hemmings. I'm the Executive Director of Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission in Waverly. Because of the announcement, I'm actually in Athens, Ohio today. So appreciate Jason taking care of that so I could be here and still participate at 2:30. I want some, if Jacob wants to go ahead and do a screen share of the PowerPoint. Thank you, Jacob. Basically in the project, when Jason contacted me about this, we came together and we come up with a scope of work. And we had talked, we knew these power plants were closing a few years ahead of them closing, had talked with Holly Johnson in Adams County about some of the things that she wanted to do. And so a lot of the scope of work we put together for this was, we talked to Holly, and she had asked us at one time, could we do an industrial park feasibility study for her county? And I think she pursued some grant, did not get that. But it was in the back of my mind when this project opportunity came about to say, hey, that's something that we did not get to accomplish with prior request of one of our member counties. And so we did proceed with an industrial park feasibility study, and Jacob's going to talk about that here in a minute. And then also something we wrote in there was, at the time this was written, opportunity zones were new, and we were like, okay, in the opportunity zones that have been distinguished in our region, what areas in those are best suited for development? So instead of a county-wide, and the Adams County study was very much more of a very comprehensive, Jacob will talk about that, more of a deep dive. And then the opportunity zone work was just really a 100,000-foot view and analysis of the development opportunities in those zones. And he'll speak about that as well. And then, of course, Jason alluded to this earlier, the recovery coordinators for Adams County and then Lawrence and Sauter County. We had one for Adams and one for Sauter and Lawrence. So you're going to hear from them, and they can tell the highlights of what they worked on better than I can. I do, like Jason said, I do want to thank the U.S. Economic Development Administration under the Department of Commerce for the funding. None of this would have been possible without their financial assistance. And I also want to thank the member counties, Adams, Sauter, and Lawrence counties, in helping us with devising scopes of work for the project to come up with something that I think we ended up with some good results on. So I'm not going to take up a lot of time because I could talk big picture stuff all day, but I'm going to let Jacob get into the details of the two things we did, and then we'll turn it over to the recovery coordinators, Skirty Consulting and Heyman Consulting Group, to talk about the coordination for Adams and Lawrence and Sauter County. So Jacob, floor is yours, sir.
Hello, I'm Jacob Taylor, as John mentioned. Here's a picture of the Adams County Industrial Park feasibility analysis. This map is a little hard to see. It's small. The thing is, the real map is pretty large, and we gave them to a physical copy and a digital copy. But if you want to see more details at the end during questions, then I can pull up a picture and show it. But for now, this is our example. So this project, we looked at primarily industrial. Well, we looked at industrial criteria areas, which were lands that, when we did the GIS analysis, met a number of criterias that we developed based on what were the best qualities. Road access was one, and then we looked at soil type, slope, areas outside or near areas that we designated as unavailable, which were basically ecological areas or sole source aquifers, and outside of floodplains. These classifications were come up with by a committee that we formed in Adams County that were a number of locals as well as elected officials and representatives from the counties and myself. We had a number of meetings, and these criteria and the maps were approved by them. And then once we finally come up with these classifications and had classified all the lands by their suitability for density of development, with industrial criteria being the most dense development and working down from there, we came up with this final map. And then going through with the ArcGIS software, we selected the particular areas that were industrial park size to show as high criteria areas, particularly looking at areas in the opportunity zone in Adams County. And then we ended up with 9 areas, which are highlighted in the final report. Then we put together a final report, which was a number of pages for the Adams County itself, and delivered that document to them. After the industrial park feasibility analysis, we had the opportunity zone maps, which we'd done for all of the 12 member counties of OVRDC. Those were done at a county level scales because of the GIS software, the GIS data that we had available to us. Most of the data sets came at county scale. So doing the analysis for the whole county saved us a lot of time, as opposed to going through and modifying the data to fit only into the opportunity zones. The analysis for the opportunity zone areas was very similar in principle to the Adams County zones, the Adams County map, but we didn't go into it as much. We didn't bound it by the road networks and a few other aspects. So we end up with a lot more viable areas on the opportunity zone maps, but they end up still very viable lands based on their soil solubility, slope, and their other characteristics, such as prone to flooding or other hazards, and all being outside of protected natural resource areas. These maps are available for all the counties. We put them together as focused on the opportunity zones, but we also have available a set of county maps, which are on will be available on through OVRDC as PDFs. That is the fast roundup of it.
So let's see real quick before we go to the recovery coordinators, if there are questions for John and me. So actually, Jacob, there's a question for you. What's the county road inventory mentioned on the Adams County map?
The county road inventory mentioned on the Adams County map is an ODOT inventory of the roads. We took that inventory, which is a statewide inventory, and then reduced it to the Adams County area for file size.
Okay.
The difference between that one and the major road section is that it covers down to the township roads. It was decided are the county roads instead of just the state routes and the US roads.
Okay. So we have a question here, and I'm going to let Evan Skirty answer this when he presents, but I'll go ahead and throw it out there, Evan, so that you have it. But in terms of maps, you may have a question or a response to this, John and Jacob. But one of the questions is, was any of the land footprint for the Stewart and Killen plants included as possible future industrial sites? And so Evan will have more knowledge about this because he's representing the county today based on his work there as a recovery coordinator. But I do know that they do not have those sites are not available to the county, I don't believe, at the current time. So I know that it's still owned by Dayton Power and Light. I believe, at least it was the last time that I checked. But Evan, you may have more knowledge of that you can talk about when you present. But John, do you or Jacob want to take a shot at that question?
I can get this one, John.
Go ahead, Jacob.
So the analysis was about the suitability, whether the areas met the criteria that was set up by the committee and by our research. And one of them did meet that area. We didn't look into whether that was an actual possibility. Many of these sites some of these sites may have difficulties in actually acquiring them for industrial use possibilities, but in terms of suitability, Yeah, yes, one of them met. The other one was, I believe, partially in a flood zone.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. John, you have more to add to that?
Yeah, one of the things going back before BOBCAT was a project, Holly told us, she said, we need to really identify a site at a minimum. And then as you heard, Jacob said we identified 9 sites. He had asked us to at least identify one in the northern part of the county and one in the southern. And of course, again, as Jacob said, through our analysis, we were able to do that both north and throughout the entire county. And the one, as he said, the Stewart Station, I think it was, that land came up. And again, we used a local committee of folks. Holly was part of that committee, and she brought in some other folks that helped out with some of that decision making and how the map came out, which that's the difference between the opportunity zone maps. Those maps were just raw maps we did to show just data that's present. The Adams County was a deeper dive. That was really Jacob doing the mapping, considering even more variables than what we did on the opportunity zone maps that you saw later there, and also having local input from a committee that met numerous times. And despite we had a COVID pandemic in the midst of it, the committee had access to Jacob's map and report to review it and comment. So we're real proud of the work, I think, on the Adams County piece of it, just because I know that Holly had asked us for that piece of work and we were able to accomplish that for her. So, and again, had it not been for the BOBCAT project, we wouldn't have done that. It was a request probably a year or two ahead of BOBCAT actually being funded. And through that project, we were able to do it. So.
Great. Thank you, John and Jacob. So before we turn it over to Evan, I believe Evan is going next. I'll just point out a couple real quick things. So, we do have some successes to share out of this project along the lines of industrial parks in Adams County, and Evan will talk about that. But our work was around identifying locally driven needs and trying to meet those needs through this project. It was not specifically focused on remediation of those sites, Stewart Station or Killen. So I think that's just an important thing that I wanted to note. We are looking for new opportunities. Certainly there will continue to be a need for how the county and others will manage those sites and their remediation, et cetera, going forward. But this was looking and how do we help Adams as well as Lawrence and Scioto with economic diversification, and then also working across the entire OVRDC region on many of the tasks around that diversification as well. So Evan, I believe that you're next. So I'll turn it over to you. And then going forward, Marty, I will let you moderate now that John and I have presented. So thanks, everyone. Again, if you have questions, continue to put them into the Q&A.
Are we ready? All right. Well, thank you. Well, John and Jacob, that was a great overview. And that really alludes to one of the key points I'd like to share before we get into substantive projects. And like you can see on the screen, the great industrial park work that the local team has done. And I was fortunate to be a part of that during my contract term of 2020 and 2021. But as you heard from John and Jacob, the main takeaway for me, and I think this could be really instructive for any community dealing with recovery, is to not wait for the closure, not wait for your recovery coordinator to be hired. I was able to jump in and be involved in some of this substantive work because of the foundational work that John, Jacob, and Holly did well before the closure was announced. So I was very impressed with that. I think some communities forget to do that. They wait for the disaster or the closure to be officially announced, and then they gather around the table to figure out how to move forward as a local economy. But that wasn't the case here. A lot of good work. Again, I started in 2020, but as John said, the knowledge of the imminent closure was happening well over 5 years ago. The community was aware it was coming. The official announcement, plant closures, came in 2018. And that's right when the county, in partnership with the CIC, closed after months or probably years of due diligence, closed on the property you can see on the screen, 55 acres that Jacob described in the opportunity zone as the new industrial park. So again, all of that foundational work led to that 2018 and 2019 purchase. For a small community, an impressive step forward of over $337,000 invested to move the community into the future like that. And the other major area of their work was the purchase of a 15,000 square foot former grocery store in the county seat of West Union. And that Holly's team is working diligently as we speak to move that forward, hopefully next year, toward offering post-secondary training programs to the community. And so both of those are two examples. There's some other things, of course, they're working on, but those two projects are really taking the community into a 21st century economic development toolkit. So I think it's a great story of, like many of our Appalachian communities that are dependent on one or two major employers like power plants, Adams County is moving forward to a more diverse economy. Like much of Southern Ohio, there aren't many modern industrial parks. So again, what you see there, it's perfectly positioned on the Appalachian Highway on US 32 for mid-sized companies. We can talk a little bit further later about the infrastructure process. It will require quite a bit of work to get it shovel ready, but it's moving toward that. And I would hope in 2023, Holly's team would be able to start talking to prospects about parcel sales. But as Jason Jolly explained, that was the intent of this, is to take the community beyond just a focus on the coal plants to something new, a more modern economic development toolkit, and a modern industrial park on 32 was a critical piece of that. So just kudos to the local community again for taking those steps before I even came on board. Again, just want to talk about, they both fill the critical gaps in the region, in the community. In addition to a modern industrial park setting, the key thing about the training center is that it fills the major void of there being no post-secondary training in the county. So that's a huge step forward. I think there may be a few other examples like that throughout Ohio, but not many. That's rare these days to have no post-secondary training at all in your community. And especially, ironically, as today with the major announcement in Columbus, the articles I've been reading, a major focus, of course, was workforce availability, access to training programs, along with the mega site that's going to be developed northeast of Columbus. But this takes a rural area into that same area of economic development, of having training programs to partner with new prospects and existing businesses to help them grow in Adams County. So it's an exciting step forward. As I said, Holly and her team are working to move that training center into classes as they head into next year. It's going to focus on CNC training, welding, nurses aid and health careers, as well as CDL truck driver training. So areas that align with the local community. So they'll be moving that forward with some cohorts, hopefully next year. Just a little bit about my role in the recovery process. When I came on board in 2020, a key part of my task was to work with Holly and the team to position the park to Jobs Ohio. And you can see there, that was the main deliverable, the main success. The industrial park did secure a $4.2 million infrastructure grant from Jobs Ohio, the state's economic development arm. So a huge win for the community. There's still other work to be done. It's a large infrastructure build out process, but again, I was happy to play a role there. Jobs Ohio, they do have some programs for site development, but it's not easy. They do not hand out money easily. It was about a 40-page PowerPoint presentation we had to put together, outlining everything from utilities to local demographics to market access, details about the local team, Holly's office, county government, their ability to manage economic development assets. It was a pretty thorough pitch that we had to put together through 2020. And then the way it works here in Ohio, we shared that with Katie's team at Ohio Southeast. She can talk a little more about that. And it's their job as the regional entity, one of 6 regional entities in the Jobs Ohio network. Her team pitched the whole industrial park sales pitch, if you will, to Jobs Ohio, resulting in that $4.2 million grant. So as you can see there, that was announced this past August, and that was the biggest, most exciting, I'd say, announcement during my tenure as the recovery coordinator. So that continues to move forward, and Holly will continue to work on some other infrastructure pieces and hopefully entertain prospects heading into 2023. I was also involved in developing a marketing piece that the local team can use to begin to share the attributes of that park in the area with prospects, real estate agents, site selection consultants in the database that I've developed. That was my role as recovery coordinator, to help to lay out an initial marketing plan. For the training center, my role was to prep some narratives focusing on the demographics. As I said, the need for modern training to align better with a modern economy. So we have some good narratives prepped for this year. I think Holly might be working on some final grant applications and other funding resources to fully outfit the facility with equipment. Again, the 15,000 square foot facility to roll out programming in those 4 industrial areas. And then the final topic, something we also worked on, is a big vision in Adams County, but it's more long-term, and that's bringing natural gas availability to the community. A very big proposition, initial estimates of about 15 million along a 25-mile line coming from the north into Adams County. It's another big missing piece, if you will, that the county's working on as part of that toolkit. Most of the county doesn't have natural gas service. The proposed line would come south into the county and head right along US 32 to the new industrial park. So that's another big vision that would definitely outfit the industrial park with all major utilities, as well as serve area residents. But I know the community will continue working on that as prospects come online and start to explore the industrial park. So that's a quick overview of the core work areas. Again, just want to emphasize again, great work by the community getting ready to get the community to these levels of wins, while I was fortunate to be under contract through the end of last year. But I think at this point, unless there's questions, I'll hand it off to Jason for his work in the region in Scioto and Lawrence.
Well, thanks, Evan, and thanks to everyone for having the opportunity to take part in the webinar today. Again, my name is Jason Hammond with the Hammond Consulting Group. Our role was to serve as the Brownfield Recovery Coordinator for Scioto and Lawrence counties, and specifically related to an industrial corridor that runs along the Ohio River. As there's a lot of, a legacy of, traditional manufacturing activity along the riverfront, and, some environmental legacy properties as well. One of those that we were asked to focus our efforts on was near Portsmouth, the former New Boston Coke site. It borders the Ohio River, and there's been some recent development surrounding this property, over the past 10 plus years. Notably, there's a large retail shopping center that was built adjacent to the site, anchored by a Walmart supercenter. And also nearby of significance is the city of Portsmouth's water treatment plant that draws intake water from the Ohio River, and that plant is responsible for serving a large percentage of both residents and businesses in Scioto County. The New Boston Coke site is a notoriously difficult brownfield property. There are several contaminants as a result of their manufacturing process that occurred at the site for decades, dating back to the early 1900s. Benzene among them, mercury, arsenic. So some of the not so nice chemicals of concern are found there in high concentrations. One of the significant tasks that we were given was to evaluate the different redevelopment options for the site. And that's a task in and of itself that becomes a bit more complicated when you layer in the different remediation options that are available to the site. Hull & Associates, which recently changed names, was the environmental consultant that the county had been working with for a long period of time, doing different environmental testing, core sampling, et cetera. During the contract term for my firm on this project, a very detailed phase 2 environmental site assessment was completed on 3 different parcels, all of which comprise the redevelopment site. Totals about 23 acres altogether. The phase 2 environmental site assessment that we reviewed with the local economic development folks, elected officials, Hull & Associates, OVRDC, it laid out some different remediation options, ranging from low cost, well, and I'll use that in relative terms, lower cost to high cost. In order to really clean the site to allow for a maximum array of redevelopment opportunities, could require excavating down 10 feet below the surface level, removing those contaminated soils, then backfilling that with 10 feet of clean fill. So you can imagine wrapping your head around this. This is occurring over a 20+ acre area. That option is extremely expensive. And, our redevelopment options were based on some of those things, both time and money constraints. Excavating down to that depth, of course, would provide the highest level of, safety for health reasons. And it also allow for the largest variety of development types. For example, in buildings that would require a foundation to be dug, significantly below the current surface level. The second option was to excavate 2 feet deep, then bring in 2 feet of clean fill to replace that. That, of course, would allow for some development to occur at a much lower cost, as you might imagine. And then the third option was to bring in just 2 feet of clean fill to act as a cap over the entire site. Again, that would, of course, severely limit the type of redevelopment activity that could occur. So part of our analysis was, again, looking at what those likely redevelopment options could be, and then balancing them against the both time and cost associated with redeveloping the property to meet those construction criteria. Ultimately, we felt, and the local economic development staff and local officials agreed, that we felt pursuing the middle option, which was the excavation of 2 feet of dirt and then refilling that was the way to go. Thankfully, the timing worked out well, where, as I'm sure all of you on this call, or most of you are aware, there's significant dollars available through the Ohio Department of Development for brownfield remediation. So a big task of ours was to complete the brownfield grant application for this site. In total, when we factor in other things that we had to look at, there's still some legacy structures on the property, a smokestack, coke ovens, various concrete pads throughout the site. So, our work included, working with other environmental firms to come in and evaluate the asbestos remediation needs, working with a variety of contractors to get demo and other costs to get the site prepped for the actual remediation. There are trees and other things, so it's not just a flat site with nothing on it to start removing dirt. There's a lot of work that has to be done just to get it ready for the remediation. So we helped coordinate all of those items as well to be included in the brownfield grant application cost structure. So with those final costs, we have the application ready for submission. We've continued to work with Scioto County folks to make sure that we get that across the finish line, up until just recently. That grant application will be submitted for $10 million. And we're very optimistic based on some conversations with folks that, again, given the legacy impact of this property, the level of contaminants, its strategic location, not only in the community, but next to other critical infrastructure like the water treatment plant, which there's actually a proposal to build a new water treatment plant adjacent to the existing one. We feel very strongly about the potential that this application has to be funded. And it's been a great opportunity to work on a project like this that not only has economic development impacts for the potential redevelopment of 20 plus acres along the riverfront, but also just from a community and health standpoint, it's going to make remove an eyesore and sort of that legacy reminder of what was. And we're excited about some of the prospects that we've been working with in partnership with Scioto County to consider constructing new development here at the site once it's fully remediated. So yeah, keep your fingers crossed. It'd be a great win for the county and the region, and a significant amount of grant dollars that would be a direct result of this EDA grant being awarded to Ohio University and OVRDC. So with that, I'd just again like to say thank you. It's been a great opportunity to be involved in this project, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at the conclusion of the presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for letting me participate in the webinar. I'm going to shift gears a little bit to a subject that 2 years ago most of us had no familiarity with, and today we're all terribly familiar with, and that's the concept of remote work. Remote work was not originally in the BOBCAT network scope of work, but in response to the experience of COVID and the effect it was having on all of our economies, including that of the OVRDC region, we started to investigate the remote work and its potential as an economic opportunity in rural areas. Now, remote work was already a trend before COVID. It was increasing number of jobs that were being performed either completely or in large part remotely, and that had sparked quite a bit of interest in a lot of rural communities, including those in Ohio and Appalachia, to attract remote workers to come to their communities. And it was popular to the extent that a number of financial incentive programs were created specifically with the objective of attracting this new breed of digital nomad remote worker to move to these communities. So that became the focus of the potential economic development value of remote work. Then COVID happened. And what has happened as a result of COVID is we've gone from a few percent of the workforce working remotely to a very large majority of it, at least during the period of the pandemic, and with the expectation that the trend toward remote work will continue in a large share for the workforce. So it has moved from what software developers might call a bug to more of a feature. And from an economic development standpoint, and especially for rural communities, remote work is significant because it has in many ways separated what were previously constraints in terms of where you live versus where you work. The labor shed phenomenon that limited job availability for residents of any region to be within a reasonable commuting distance, and for that factor, for employers being able to access talent within a commuting labor shed. Remote work has in many ways broken that previous connection in ways that I think offer some promise, particularly for rural areas. And that's because for a long time, there has been a thwarting of Americans' preference to live in smaller towns and rural areas. Polling by the Gallup Corporation the last several years found not only before COVID, but especially during COVID, there's been a strong preference for many people to move from where they lived because of employment availability to areas where they would prefer to live. So it's what we call a thwarted preference. And in many ways, 39% of the American public being polled would prefer to live in either a rural or a town environment if they were able to do so. And the primary reason pre-COVID that they weren't able to do so because simply wasn't available employment. Remote work offers this intriguing possibility to enable people to live where they want and still work where they'd like through remote work. So beyond the simple concept of attracting remote workers to move to your community, which had been the previous focus, we started researching what the other benefits for rural areas like the BOBCAT network region might benefit from remote work. And in many ways, the benefit is to displace the sort of physical out commuting that we're already experiencing in the region. Already over 50% of the residents in the OVRDC region out commute. Now, many of them out commute to an adjacent county within the region, but some out commute beyond the bounds of the region itself. That's 100,000 workers who are physically out commuting. But one of the benefits of remote work, I think one of the reasons so many people have been hesitant to return to workplace settings is the savings that have been achieved by elimination of a lot of that physical out commuting. So a number of benefits accrue from remote work above and beyond the recruitment of new residents to move to the community. It imports external income just as out commuting does, but without the effect of retail leakage that tends to come along with physical out commuting. Saves a tremendous amount of cost. The average OVRDC out commuter spends over $7,000 a year in commuting costs and 250 hours a year. That's a considerable savings, and again, part of what I think is the reluctance for people to move back to the in-office environment. And for many people, there have been existing barriers to entry that I think have decreased labor force participation that we've seen both nationally and at the state level and within the region itself. And another important opportunity that remote work offers is to retain existing residents who would love to stay in the region. New graduates in particular often feel compelled to move outside of the region to pursue employment, whereas remote work might provide a different avenue to remain within their communities while still advancing in their professions. So in other words, that would also advance upward mobility for existing residents and at the same time diversify the economy as people work for a broader range of industry through remote work than is currently available in their economy. Net result of all this is potential to retain current residents, to attract new residents moving into the area enabled by remote work, growing and revitalizing the counties and their populations. In order to do that, we built a scorecard of factors necessary to support remote work, a remote work readiness, if you will, for rural areas. I did a lot of literature research, some emerging research on remote work that was useful, and found that there were 10 primary factors. Now, these are not in particular order priority, but the first three are absolute prerequisites for remote work. So this was a scorecard we developed to then assess the extent to which the OVRDC region is ready to support work, where it has advantages and where there could be some room for improvement. What we determined from that is that there were a number of positive aspects already in place that would position the region to both support remote work by existing residents and potentially to attract new residents who had remote work occupations. In particular, attainable housing and cost of living are some of the drivers of the sort of relocation decisions being made. I think probably attainable housing being one of the most profound. And professional education is some of that postgraduate, some of that post-secondary education that we were discussing earlier. There's abundant resources in the area for people to continue to add to their professional skill mix through certifications and trainings, and those are essential for people wanting to remain in place while still advancing professionally. On the more neutral, in some cases trending toward negative side, is internet access in the region, and they're very, very difficult to come up with consistent measures of the quality of internet access. But inevitably, there are areas that have good access and areas that don't. That applies in the OVRDC region. It applies generally anywhere in the U.S., certainly anywhere in Ohio. But internet access is in some cases excellent, in some cases problematic. The same thing applies to remote workspaces, childcare, and under travel access, while it's a very fine transportation system in terms of highway transportation, access to airports is in some areas of the region, somewhat problematic. Remote work will occasionally, even for full-time remote work, require people to travel to locations, perhaps metro areas where their primary employer is. And airport access is not as convenient in some areas of the region as it is in others. On the negative side, we would cite that while there's an abundance of workforce development and workforce training programs in the region, there's been very little pivoting of those resources specifically to preparing people for remote work. Now, the range of occupations that have been performed through remote work has expanded greatly during the pandemic as that form of employment model has been codified and more people have participated in it. So there is a large range of occupations that people could either train for or retrain for that would be remote work capable. But that's going to require some adjustment to the way we've traditionally and conventionally provided workforce development, which is to established employers in a given geographic labor shed. Lastly is financial incentives. So while a lot of the interest in remote work evolved first around attracting remote workers, perhaps using financial incentives, our assessment of the economic impact of that type of remote work development using financial incentives found that the economic impact of that was rather minimal compared to some of the impacts of other forms of remote work benefits. So financial incentives, while they don't exist in the region right now, may or may not be a big disadvantage depending on how the region chooses to support remote work. And in that vein, there are a number of strategies we found that are possible to support remote work, and collectively they represent a strategic portfolio. I've highlighted the top three. The order of priority of these is that they go from highest level of likely success to the lowest. The low-hanging fruit, if you will, is to enable people to continue to remote work as they're doing right now. Secondly, to help people who are not currently remote working convert to that. Third would be people who are not in a profession that is remote work capable to perhaps retrain to shift to remote work occupations. And fourthly, to emphasize remote work as an outplacement opportunity for graduates and people who might likely have to move out of the area, out-migrate from the region. Below that are people who are considering moving to the area, and the most obvious opportunities for those are people who are formerly from the area who would like to return, or those who have some family or social connection who would reconnect. Really, the lowest probability of success are incenting remote workers from outside the region who have no established connection. And interestingly, that's really where the conversation on remote work began, which was the use of financial incentives to attract remote workers. We found that there are a number of other options for the region. It does not exclude the idea of attracting remote workers, but there are a number of other applications that have a higher expected economic return. So our conclusion was that remote work was pre-COVID already a growing phenomenon. During COVID, it's been codified. It's been adopted as a more conventional employment model. So it is going to be a sustained trend, although it will evolve and probably move in some cases to a hybrid model of days in office and days remote. But a number of jobs listed right now on Indeed.com, or go to any job search website, you're going to find 100,000 remote work opportunities in the U.S. that in theory are available to residents of OVRDC. Secondly, remote work is going to allow people to remain in the area who prefer to, or move to the area if they prefer to a greater extent than they could in the past. And in that sense, remote work is an opportunity to provide economic development benefits for both existing residents and potentially to those prospects who might want to move to the area. And it's good, and that's fortunate because the economic impacts that we were able to calculate for incented in-migrants, remote workers, were rather minimal for a variety of reasons we went into detail in the report. And lastly, applying the scorecard found that OVRDC has a number of existing advantages and some disadvantages that they might want to try to address depending on what form of remote work they feel will be matched to the priorities of the area. So emphasizing remote work availability for existing residents is likely to produce economic benefits that address some of the priorities of the region, more so than a program of incenting outside remote workers to move to the region. So that's a quick summation of the research we did on this. I will tell you, as someone who's been involved in economic development in rural economies, remote work seems to be one of the better opportunities that we have in front of us. Even if it evolved out of necessity, I think it's being revealed as an opportunity, but will require a significant pivot on the way we've approached workforce development today. So thank you for the opportunity to present, and I'll look forward to any questions after the conclusion of the seminar.
Thank you, Marty. And let me share my screen here. I should have that up. So just give you some background on me. I've been the Director of Community and Economic Development for Clermont County since August of 2020. I graduated Ohio's Master of Public Administration program in spring 2019. So yeah, I value my relationship with the university, and it has helped me not only in my personal and professional development, but also as a partner in my professional capacity. So as my department is progressing through our strategic plan, there we go. As my department is progressing through our strategic planning, Ohio University has helped to inform our process. So I'll get into a little bit about what we're doing and what we're doing with Ohio University. As background on our current state, it's important to note that during the last decade, 290 coal power plants have closed, and that represents about 40% of the nation's coal generating capacity. In addition to the nearby closings in Adams and Clermont County here, we're facing the impending and accelerated closing of the Zimmer power plant on May 31st of this year. So it was supposed to be, a few years down the road, and then late in 2021, so just a month or two ago, they announced, hey, we're going to be closing on May 31st of next year. So that became a shock for many. And hopefully I can look at that more as an opportunity than a system shock. So Clermont County is one of the fastest growing counties in Ohio. We have a high labor participation rate compared to the state and the nation. And we have a low cost of living, a low cost of doing business. But we have a lot of challenges that include the same supply chain and labor stressors that others have throughout the nation. And when a power plant closes, the largest impact is often felt by the local community where the plant is located, and particularly the school district. And when a power plant is fully operational, its property value and payroll generation provide income for local governments, families, and the schools. And when they close, a major source of funds for all three is eliminated. Local governments still have to provide the services for the same number of residents, but the resources aren't there this year that were there last year. And that goes the same for schools, and sometimes families get displaced. So, despite the shocks that are to our local economy, Clermont County is rebounding. Our recent success at our South Afton Industrial Park with the $550 million investment from Nestle Purina was an economic win that was independent. By that, I mean that, to say that South Afton was not a direct response to the shift in the coal economy, but the coal industry's changes and impact on our workforce, economy, and local politics has become more important, and it's now part of our planning for the future. So Ohio University has either assisted us recently or is in the process of assisting us as we plan our future growth in response to the coal challenge. The first effort with the school manifested itself in an economic impact analysis of the Nestle Purina facility. So this analysis helped our department and the company understand the impact that the investment of our investment beyond the capital investment and the $12 million annual payroll that it's going to generate. Since this report was completed, Nestle Purina has purchased an additional 138 acres adjacent to its new facility that's currently under construction. So that would potentially allow additional investment of the same magnitude as the current facility. So that $550 million site, maybe in a few years, could become $1 billion site. And that is a big win for Clermont County if that's the case. And since they are already applying for zoning change to industrial for the new property that they purchased. I imagine that that's the type of development that we can look forward to in the coming years. So the next study with Ohio University originated with our outreach to the Voinovich School for assistance with answering the question regarding the feasibility of developing an incubator in Clermont County. Incubators already exist in the region and they require a great deal of resources and attention. So we adjusted the scope, and Brent Lane, who just preceded me, by the way, is my primary contact for the studies that we're conducting with Ohio University, as is Dr. Jolly. So we adjusted the scope of the study to determine what industries would be suitable for Clermont County to court and where we might market regionally. And it also identifies specific companies that might be poised for expansion and relocation to a competitive market. And so Ohio University's analysis has helped us to direct our efforts towards our next industrial park venture. Not only has it provided guidance for our resources, the analysis will also allow us to market our next property in a targeted way. Whereas the traditional methods are geared towards placing a site on the market and buying ads in site selection magazines, adding a more targeted approach will allow us to market more surgically to attract companies that complement the ecosphere that exists here and to strengthen it. So a third study that's currently underway is an assessment of Clermont County's economic opportunities along the Ohio River. With both power plants, Beckford and Zimmer, on the Ohio River, this is the region that is most directly affected. And as you recall, Beckford closed 7 years ago, Zimmer closes this year. Both of these closures present us with potential opportunities. So we asked the questions: are we taking full advantage of our industrial, commercial, and recreational opportunities along the Ohio River? Should Clermont County or its Port Authority or Community Improvement Corporation pursue the redevelopment of one of the ports at these power plants? The Nestle Purina study validated the value of creating an industrial park. So without that industrial park, we wouldn't have Nestle Purina or any of the other development at the South Afton site. So to say goodbye to the $550 million investment, the $12 million payroll, and the associated development that's coming with that, as well as the additional investment that Nestle Purina is now making, which presumably will be more industrial development. So we know that one method of being successful in development is to have that product. And the second study helps us to understand how we can market our future ventures in a way that strengthens our current culture instead of trying to fit a new company in a space that may not be exactly right for them. And the Ohio River analysis will inform our department about what can work, what historically does not work, and identify opportunities in an area that has been directly affected by the coal power industry shift. So yeah, I'm very thankful for the relationship that Clermont County has developed with the BOBCAT network. As we plan for our future, the information and analysis that Ohio University and the Voinovich School is providing us will be invaluable. And I thank Ohio University, the Voinovich School, and the BOBCAT network, and I look forward to working together in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. I'm Katie Farber, the Vice President at Ohio Southeast. And just a little background, Ohio Southeast is a regional economic development organization. Marty mentioned earlier, we are one of 6 regional partners that do the work basically for Jobs Ohio in different parts of the state. So our mission is to retain all the investment that we have in the industrial sector or traded sectors, 10 specifically outlined in the works of Jobs Ohio. We want to retain what we have, we want to expand what we have, and we want to attract new investment to the region. So we come in as a partner to everyone who's presented on this BOBCAT project. But I also would just like to point out the importance of the partners and the myriad of partners that we work with throughout the region on economic development opportunities. First, I'd like to just call out the local partners that we work with. They're in the trenches every day in their communities, working to improve economic opportunities. We've heard mostly about the work that BOBCAT covered to develop industry-ready sites, something that we sorely lack in this region. And oftentimes we have to look at redevelopment opportunities as well as new greenfield opportunities. So to those local partners that are seeking that out every day, thank you. Other regional partners that we work with on a regular basis are the team at the OU Voinovich School, as well as our local development districts. John Hemmings and his counterparts at Omega and Buckeye Hills are valuable economic development partners that we rely on and try to work in tandem with, so that we're multiplying the resources that each of us has. The support that we get in the region from Jobs Ohio to accelerate development of key industrial areas throughout the region is invaluable. Evan had referred to the subsequent Jobs Ohio site grant that the Winchester Industrial Park was able to leverage this year, and that's a proud accomplishment for all of those who got to work with Holly and her team to make that happen. That's one of our most prized accomplishments, I would think, throughout the region. So we thank Jobs Ohio for making those programs and those monies available to us. And then finally, our federal partners have been investing in this region for decades on a number of things, and specifically to EDA today and the BOBCAT network and all of the other EDA investments that we have in this 25 county region in southern and southeastern Ohio. You bring the much needed financial resources for us to accomplish the goals. So the teamwork is the most important thing that we value and try to keep going every day, because working in parallel and in tandem is it's providing rewards to us already. This region's got challenges. About that some today. We have a declining population. We have an aging workforce. We have few ready large industrial sites for buildings to invest, to attract investment. And we lack in infrastructure, broadband, water and sewer infrastructure, natural gas access was all mentioned. So while those challenges seem daunting, we do have a number of opportunities that we work in the kind of support that we've gotten from EDA and having this background information and evaluation of sites and remote work, things like that, helps us leverage opportunities. So the opportunities that we see are, we actually have a labor surplus. Now, some may scoff at that, but we can document that 145,000 people commute out of this region every day to metro areas. And that 145,000 number is a true labor surplus when we're talking about business attraction projects. And we are getting traction with that. The other opportunities, new sites are being developed to attract new investment with job creation. We've spoken a lot about Winchester Industrial Park. We hope that in Scioto County, we can reclaim and redevelop land. And that's going on throughout the region, whether it's in recent acquisition in Monroe County, congratulations, Jason, or things that EDA may have worked toward in other past projects that culminated in these industrial areas being established or acquired. And then the other opportunity is projects like BOBCAT bolster our ability to shorten that timeline for the investment, because the provision of technical assistance and the money that all of that costs help us look to other resources to make a difference. So I want to thank EDA and all of the partners for all that you continue to do. And we hope you will keep on doing it to make this region strong. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. That concludes our presentations. We're welcoming you to ask any questions of the panelists. And I think we have a few that let me pull them up here. One question, and I think, Evan, this is probably one that you can answer. Where will they seek funding from to install the natural gas pipelines? State funds? Question mark?
The state funds might be tough. The Jobs Ohio was focused on water, sewer, and road. I won't speak for the local team in their current thinking, as again, my contract ended last year. And it ended as a lot of these new federal programs were coming on board. So I think, I'm assuming the local community is probably tracking those federal funds closely. I don't think ARPA can touch gas. That's water and sewer projects. We explored tax increment financing, but of course that depends on major investments for tax revenue to help finance the infrastructure. So the difficult thing about the 25-mile run of the proposed gas line is it is very rural. And so it's hard to TIF the area and generate revenue in the near term. So no, I would say the federal funds will be the main focus.
Great. Thanks, Evan. This is a question for you, Brent. Aren't there already some localities in the U.S. that have offered financial incentives to encourage in-migration?
Yeah, there are about a dozen that we examined. We look at their spending to date, their outcomes to date. We looked at the capacity of their budgets, and it was able from that to look at the actual number of relocations that either had occurred or that would occur if they spent their whole budgets on this. The conclusion of that was that the experience of this dozen or so programs was both, one, limited, so it was hard to judge what the success rate was likely to be in terms of attracting them, but perhaps more significantly, even if they were 100% successful, given their capacity, the economic impact would be rather small. In other words, if they succeed, it would still be a quite small success. And the reality is that recruiting individuals to move to your community can work, but you don't capture a lot of economic benefits because they don't have the same effect as, say, a company moving into the community does. So it's simply a smaller range of economic benefits, and those existing programs are small in scale, and even if they were 100% successful, would have really rather minimal economic benefits compared to the benefits that would accrue if you focused on supporting remote work amongst your resident population, of which there were hundreds or thousands more who could benefit from that approach.
Brent, another one for you while you're on. What is the most important policy action the region can take to support remote work?
I would say that there are one short-term, one long-term. The first is practice what you preach. If you've got remote work taking place within, say, your government structure right now, find ways to codify that and practice remote work with public employment. But secondly, look at your existing workforce development programs and see if there are opportunities to augment them with a focus on remote work occupations and the kind of digital skills that we've all had to acquire ad hoc to do remote work. So those are two things that I think can be done right now within the region and would start to have some significant benefits in the very near term.
Great. Thanks, Brent. Evan, this one's for you as well. Are you currently recruiting businesses, industry to the Winchester Industrial Park as of yet? And if so, what are your targeted industries?
No, that definitely didn't reach that level as I was finishing up. It's still going through the infrastructure build out. As I said, we've drafted some general marketing pieces to kind of start to flood the market to consultants and real estate agents, just to bring awareness of the new asset. But no major. Of course, again, I haven't been under contract. I think Holly's on the call. If she's talking to folks, I hope conversations are starting in the. There's still some infrastructure build out to start, and targeted industries. I mean, that could run the gamut of various manufacturing sectors. Of course, petrochemical, I would think, is still one. The oil and gas movement in the Ohio River corridor taken a bit of a downturn in the past couple of years, but the corridor in general is still getting some increased looks from that community. So I think even though Winchester is not right on the river, it's still in that corridor, and as we said, right on a great highway, and I think going to get some looks from that sector.
Great. Another one for you, Evan. Can you expand on the importance of collaboration among agencies throughout the recovery process?
Well, just to reiterate, nice. There's Holly there. That's great news. She is already talking with prospects. Collaboration, I think, just to reiterate everything we've talked about, the process of getting the park to where it is today was a multi-agency effort, working closely with Holly at the local level to put that presentation together. And then, as I said, the strict Jobs Ohio process is it does have to work through the regional system, through Katie's team. So it was great working with her and her partners. Without that, it would not have happened. It has to go through Ohio Southeast to be pitched to Jobs Ohio. And then again, of course, partnering with you all and OVRDC, the work that Jacob described, all of the analysis and feasibility to really get all stakeholders on board and under consensus that Winchester Industrial really does make sense. That was because of all of their great analysis of the land uses and density factors, as Jacob described, making the case for Winchester.
Great, thanks, Evan. Katie, this one's for you. You said that 145,000 people are commuting to metro areas every day from our area. Where can that statistic be found, and what areas does it cover?
Well, I'll have to go to my data guy, my research guy, to give you those sources, but we can do that. I just don't have them off the top of my head. That outmigration is measured from the entire region. So if we would start in Adams County, we look at who's going to Cincinnati. And as you move around the county, we're doing Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus. There are people in the northeasternmost portion of this 25 county identified region who are going toward the Cleveland area. There are people who go to Pittsburgh every day, Wheeling, Huntington. I'm going all the way around my loop. And then, Scioto County would have people commuting down into Kentucky. So if whoever asked that question will just put something in the chat where they'd like me to send a response to them, I sure can do that.
Thanks, Katie. And I think that's the extent of the questions. Give everybody another minute to add any if they would like. Great. Well, listen, I want to thank all of our presenters, and I want to thank you, our audience, for your attention and time today. This has been a great project to work on. We want to thank the US EDA for their support and partnership through this grant effort, and the future is bright for the region. We've got a lot of good things going on, and stay tuned for more exciting news. With that, I'll conclude the webinar. Thanks again for your participation.